There's usually not a lot left of a person once they're shot with a shotgun.
A brutal killing.
Blood was everywhere. The carnage, the just brutality. That was the worst scene that I've seen.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
And this case had all the classic elements of sex, money, and even drugs.
That was the killer calling and telling them that the job is done.
He needed to go in there and eliminate these problems in his life so he could have what he always wanted.
I can protect you, you tell me the truth.
I would not lie to you about a murder.
The truth will be revealed.
She knew that she was playing with fire. That's when the fuse was lit.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Springfield, Georgia, personifies the small-town charm of the South.
Springfield is the county seat of Effingham County. It's a quiet little community. It's rural, a lot of farmland.
It only has 2 red lights. That's how small it is. Just a few thousand people.
One hot summer night, violence erupts at one of the county's most respected homes.
In the early morning hours, Effingham Dispatch received a call from a female.
911.
Help, please.
Can I help you? What's wrong?
Gun shot.
You're shot.
Yes,
How did you get shot, ma'am?
I don't know.
It was difficult to make out what she was trying to tell them, but they did pick out a couple of words.
Husband shot 2.
Your husband shot too?
Yes,
Who else is in the house with you?
son.
Your son?
Yes,
Did he get shot too, or you don't know?
I don't know.
Do you know who shot you?
No.
Okay, just stay with me, honey. I got somebody coming to you. Just stay with me, okay?
Upon arrival, deputies locate 58-year-old Linda Height.
When the first responders arrived, they could not believe Linda was even alive. She had taken a shirt and wrapped it around her lower jaw to help stem the flow of blood.
The emergency medical services, they arrived on scene and transported her to a local hospital to immediately get her help. The other 2 individuals in the house, one was Linda's husband, Philip, and a son, Carey. Both of them had sustained gunshot wounds to the head. It was obvious that no intervention would have saved them.
Investigator Eric Reiner and Assistant District Attorney Michael Muldrew locked down the scene alongside Effingham County Sheriffs.
We knew that this was going to be a very difficult case, that it is going to take tremendous man-hours. The sheriff, knowing that, assessed the situation and called in help, and he called in the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations.
Special Agent Eugene Howard is assigned as the lead.
When I approached the scene and drove onto the road where the Heights family lived, the first thing I realized was the remoteness of the location. It was in a rural location, family dwelling down a dirt road. It wasn't in a public area. Inside the home, I noticed the overwhelming smell of gasoline. We immediately realized that the person who did this was gonna try to set the house on fire, to try to cover up the evidence.
But the crime scene remains intact.
It appeared that the son, Carey, was shot first. Carey was in the bedroom to the left. He was shot at close range, and he was shot with what appeared to be a shotgun. You walked down the hallway and you were able to see the father, Philip Height. It appeared that Philip raised up in his bed as a result of hearing the gunshot. Then Philip was shot. Immediately to the right, you see that there was a gunshot through the bathroom door where Linda was shot at.
Shotguns are destructive. They're large barrels, and there's a lot of different metal pellets that come out. There's usually not a lot left of a person once they're shot with a shotgun.
Blood was everywhere. That's, as of today, was the worst scene that I've seen. As far as the carnage, just brutality of the scene, and the sheer will for Linda to live. We wish we could have talked to her, but at that time she was in major surgery in an attempt to save her life.
To find the person who killed Philip Height and his son Carey and left Linda for dead, investigators will need to reconstruct the last hours of the victims' lives.
What you start thinking about as an investigator is the victimology. Why or what caused this family to be brutally murdered and assaulted? Initially, and from the evidence, it appeared to be a robbery or a break-in. There's a big hunting community in Effingham, so it's not uncommon to have a shotgun. However, there was no shells found at the scene. No person who wanted to come in and rob and shoot had a reason to pick up the shotgun shells, especially if they were gonna set the house on fire. This was different than a random burglary.
There was nothing taken from the house.
Stuff is still there, it's cash.
There were wallets, there was jewelry, there was money and money clips. Truly nothing had been disturbed.
Indication from the scene was that the person went in with the sole intent of killing every soul in the residence.
The apparent targeting of all three Heights in one attack directs them to examine the family history.
Their family's been in this county since its foundation.
Philip Height was well known, extremely well respected. He was connected with a lot of the movers and shakers in South Georgia, and if you wanted to get a real estate deal done, you went to Philip Height.
Philip was the breadwinner. Linda was the homekeeper. She took care of the kids and was the traditional Southern belle and the matriarch. They had 3 sons, Carey Height, the youngest, Chris Height, the middle child, and Craig Height, the oldest.
Carey was his daddy's shadow, and he actually worked with him every day in their development company. In a lot of ways, they were 2 peas in a pod.
Carey was also married to his high school sweetheart, Robin, with whom he had a boy and 2 girls.
They went to notify Robin at her home. They find her there with her children.
She was told about the murders. She was distraught.
Robin tells police Carey went to his parents' house at approximately 4 p.m. the previous day and had called to say goodnight to the kids at 8:30.
The Heights held family higher than anything else. It was beyond devastating.
There's a lot of emotion in all of this, but your job is to solve the murder. Very difficult questions have to be asked. That's your job. It's not like you like to do it. You have to do it.
She stated that she didn't have any idea who could have done this.
Then she asked, had anyone talked to her brother-in-law yet, referring to Craig.
Police locate Philip and Linda's eldest son.
Craig was actually living in a friend's hunting cabin, which was several miles away.
When we arrived, Craig was upset, just dismay, grief.
He gave a statement. He said he had been at the hunting cabin and that he had gone there earlier in the evening and he had been there all night and that he had not found out about the murders until he was called well on up in the morning.
Investigators get their first real lead.
We found out that Philip's business was in dire straits. He was struggling at that point. Due to the downturn in the economy, a lot of real estate deals were going bust. There were foreclosures left and right.
Billions, if not trillions of dollars was lost in the 2008 financial crisis. Millionaires reduced to paupers. And that leads to a number of people having motive to commit murder.
One of the investigative tracks that would have had to have been investigated was whether money was owed to clients in the business that the father and the son ran.
They might appear successful from the outside, but as in many instances, looks can be deceiving.
Investigators discover the brutal attack on the Height family may be connected to the business Philip and his son Carey ran together.
There had been some contentiousness between Philip and some of the other people that he worked with in development business and bankers. And we thought that somebody did this to get back at him somehow.
You must investigate creditors or persons that were involved in the business. Is it 10, 20, $30 million at stake? People will do anything for money.
As they start their inquiry, they receive a tip.
This lady in Effingham County received a phone call, and she tells the sheriff that she had received it approximately the same time that she thought that the Height murders were being carried out. She could hardly hear them, but she could hear them say, "The deed is done."
This happened that night, and that's what made the person who received the call think, hey, this might have something to do with the case.
You cannot discount anything at that point. A lot of times, the leads that we get from the community actually result in some good information. So the first thing you do is you get phone records. We interviewed a lot of people that had conducted business with Philip. We searched his real estate business. We toted out boxes of records, searched through all those records. We could not come up with any credible information that would lead us to a motive for the crime. People argue, but it doesn't mean that they're going to kill you. Maybe he did have an exchange of words, but that was not a viable motive for murder.
Philip would not have made any decisions that would have jeopardized himself or his family. He just wasn't one of those type people. He wasn't dealing with the mob. He wasn't borrowing money from loan sharks. He was a hard businessman, but he was a businessman.
Police pore over phone records, finally locating their mystery caller.
It was just a random telephone call in the middle of the night for someone that was doing some repair work at a restaurant. That person called and said, hey, the job is done, and they called the wrong number. It just proved to be just a random telephone call, but it had to be investigated.
They turned their focus to the middle son.
Chris was a successful builder and lived close by Linda and Philip and was a real integral part of the family. He was devastated beyond belief.
Chris tells investigators he was at his parents' house at 4 p.m. when Carey first arrived.
Chris was in a hurry to get home, feed his children, bathe his children, get ready for their school the next day.
He reported that he was home with his wife that entire night, which was confirmed by his wife.
But Chris does have an idea about where they should go next.
Chris mentioned his father saying to him that he reported something to the local law enforcement.
There was a meth addict down the road that was manufacturing methamphetamine.
Philip called law enforcement and said, hey, you know, this guy is selling meth in our neck of the woods.
He actually went to prison for that.
They thought that maybe this particular person had something to do with the death of Philip and Carey Height.
Police learned the man, Peter Hoffman, served close to 3 years for possessing and manufacturing methamphetamine.
Crystal meth is a huge problem in the southern United States. And people who have a drug trafficking network will do anything to keep that network. And if you're a crystal meth dealer, you're a bad person, capable of terrible acts. And if you go to jail because somebody ratted you out, and you sit in jail and you stew and stew, in this case, it's entirely plausible that the father had a target on his back.
They determine Hoffman lives just over a mile from the Height home.
You know, you have to track this down. You can collect all this evidence, but until you confront that person, you don't really know how it fits together. You knock on the door, you talk to the guy, and you do an interview.
Hoffman claims he was nowhere near the Height house that evening.
We've all done this for many years, so we get a feeling on whether or not someone is being honest. You know, you can tell if something's off. You speak with them and question them about the evidence that you've collected, and you look at the reaction, and it kind of helps you synthesize this evidence and see if it's actually something that you can use that points to the guilt or innocence of the person. And in that particular case, did not pan out.
It was a very tantalizing rumor, but there was absolutely no evidence that this guy had any ill will towards the Heights when he got out.
Investigators turned back to the scene for more clues.
We noticed that there was a key in the door, and it was a true deadbolt, which means it's keyed on both sides.
Through the family, they learn of a backup key used only for emergencies.
Only a handful of people knew about this secret key that allowed access to the house. It was kept in a utility room off the carport in a special little notch above the door, and it would not be something that even a trained burglar would normally find.
When the garage is searched, that key is missing.
So we knew that that was the key from the secret hiding place.
It would lead me right away as an investigator to believe this was some form of what we'll call an inside job.
Since we had such a small number of people that knew about the key, it had to be somebody that was closely associated with this family and that actually had the intent to commit an execution.
They press the family to identify anyone with knowledge of the key. One name stands out.
There was another particular person that came in interest, and that was John Henry, Robin Height's brother. It was mentioned to us that, well, John Henry goes onto the property all the time, and he would know where the key was at. John Henry was mentioned by the family because he had personal problems.
And so you have a person of interest who has access to the deceased house. You have to now track the suspect's movements in those 24 hours to figure out whether or not this is the person who did it.
Police have identified family friend John Henry as a person of interest in the Height murders.
We found out that he was a very, very close friend of Carey Height. Carey got him a lot of jobs. He was a handyman.
This friendship makes Henry's potential motive for murder unclear.
Most murders are committed between people who know each other, and it usually comes down to a factor involving the relationship itself. In these cases where that person either orchestrated or committed the murder, identifying motive, it's not so easy for the detective. You can't have that tunnel vision. You still have to step back and investigate the whole case.
They track down John Henry at his home.
He claimed that he was actually in Charleston, South Carolina for the 1-year anniversary of his marriage, and said they were staying at a nice hotel about 2.5 hours away from Springfield, Georgia.
If he's got an alibi, then typically you tell the police right away you've got an alibi and you provide alibi evidence.
We went to the hotel that he stayed at, picked up information from there, verifying that he was there. John Henry absolutely loved Carey Height. After looking into his alibi, learning about his close relationship with Carey Height, just wouldn't have been possible for him to have committed this act. He knew about the key, but he didn't do it.
We find evidence and we follow the evidence, and wherever it leads us is where we go. You have a theory, theories change.
Eliminating suspects can often be more important than identifying suspects. The end goal, of course, being that there's one name left.
As you eliminate leads, you're narrowing focus, you're really putting everything into it because you got to run it out. You know, you've got to make sure because it's a person's life. Of course, when something like this happens, it's like a thunderclap. People start looking and are paranoid. They don't know. They think they may be next, you know. Especially in this area of Effingham County, because it still has that small town vibe.
When we're dealing with small town murders, people love to talk. It's not the same as a big city where no one talks. It's the exact opposite.
Rumors were spreading that Robin had been having an affair.
Infidelity in and of itself is relatively common as we can base on the amount of divorces and separations that go on. When an investigator learns that the partner of the deceased had been cheating, that creates a different mindset for the investigator. Infidelity is often part of the motive of someone's death, and it has to be investigated.
When we contacted Robin Height about it, she was forthcoming with the information. She didn't try to hide the fact that there was an affair.
She said The affair had been going on for some months.
When you start fooling around on your spouse, it's a recipe for disaster, and the chances of it not ending well, vis-a-vis in a murder, are extremely likely.
Believing Carey may have been the main target, they need to determine his wife's whereabouts on the night of the crime.
Robin Height reported that she was at home all night.
There was dozens and dozens of man-hours spent tracking that down and getting cell phone records. Her cell phone was at the house all night long.
Robin never left the residence that night.
But what detectives soon discover changes everything.
She was having an affair with her brother-in-law, Craig.
Allegations of an illicit affair cast suspicion on Philip and Linda's oldest son, Craig.
We asked Craig about his relationship with Robin Height, and he's completely denied any sexual relationship with his sister-in-law. But we knew he was lying about the affair. That was a very crucial moment in the investigation.
He's brought in for further questioning.
We did a hard-hitting interview. He lied about the affair even more. So we scheduled him for a polygraph. He started to change his statements. He told us that he did have an affair.
If someone is caught in a lie by police, they will often change their story afterwards. They will often backpedal. It shines the light on them because they didn't tell the truth in the first place.
Craig's lie opens the door to a shocking suggestion that even for investigators is hard to stomach.
People didn't think there was any way he could shoot his mom. Knowing the community, knowing the status of this family, we knew that we were going to have to leave no stone unturned and no questions unanswered.
After multiple surgeries, the sole survivor of the attack comes to.
The doctors at the hospital could not believe Linda was alive, and everybody just agrees that it's a miracle that she made it.
Linda is pressed for details about her attacker, but the impact of her trauma proves too great.
She did not know who the person was.
They were allowing other family to come in. Chris, her middle son, came in to see her first, and they had a very sweet reunion. As soon as he left, Craig came in. And everyone noticed that the heart monitor started racing. Blood pressure, heart rate, everything skyrocketed. He was just there a couple of minutes and he left. And then her heart went back to normal.
Family members were picking up on the fact that Craig showed visible sickness when he was found out that his mother would make a full recovery.
Craig's mother is unable to provide more information, so Special Agent Howard turns to her middle son, Chris, to see what he knows.
Chris indicated the family was just learning of the affair. This was just tearing his family apart.
For Philip to see the family that he and Linda had nurtured fall apart because of his oldest son's affair with his youngest son's wife, it was beyond devastating.
Chris says the conflict had recently come to a breaking point.
Craig was told an ultimatum that if he did not leave Robin Height alone, and leave Carey's family alone, that he would be completely removed from Philip's will. At the same time, Carey was trying to remove Robin from his will.
Wills can tear families apart if the content of the wills are known. If it is disclosed that a person's not included in the will, or one person's getting more than another person, that could be a motive for someone to get very upset and perhaps commit murder.
Amid the denials, Carey and Philip look for tangible proof of the affair.
Carey installed a GPS device on Robin's vehicle. And so they knew where she had been going.
On that Saturday and that weekend, Craig and Robin spent the weekend together.
A friend of Philip's, who owned a helicopter, was asked by Philip to fly over this hunting cabin where they suspected Robin was meeting him.
He flew over, took some photographs of them.
Craig came to the immediate conclusion that that was his daddy sending somebody to spy on him.
Craig had been confronted by Philip in the past, and he had denied it. Craig couldn't deny the fact that they were having an affair anymore.
Craig was upset. He knew that everything was coming to an end.
The life that Craig wanted was the life that his brother lived. He wanted his brother's life. He wanted his brother's wife. Conflicts between brothers is as old as the Bible. It's as old as mankind. It's as old as history itself.
That Sunday, Carey confronts his wife, Robin.
He says, I'm leaving, I'm filing for a divorce.
Carey decided to go stay at his mother's house, which was the first time he had stayed there since their marriage.
When Carey got there, he actually requested Chris to witness his signing of a new will. Chris told him, I don't have time right now, but we'll do it later. And unfortunately, there was no later.
It's compelling circumstantial evidence, but still not enough for an arrest.
The picture of the killer was coming into focus. But there was no physical evidence, no eyewitness, no DNA.
We knew, due to the nature of the crime and the people involved, that we didn't have to not only prove that Craig Height committed the crime beyond a reasonable doubt, but we also had to prove that no one else committed the crime. That's different from most cases.
They need to place the gun in Craig's hands.
We determined the shotgun type that he used and the shell that he used would cause a mark, would leave a really big bruise.
So they asked Craig, would you mind removing your shirt? And he said that he had an accident getting out of a bathtub the other day, and he got some bruises. He was giving an explanation to a question that nobody was asking. When he pulled the shirt off, there were 2 bruises on this shoulder and 1 bruise on this shoulder. They were consistent with a shotgun being held.
It was the moment that I knew without a doubt that Craig Height was the shooter.
Investigators believe Craig Height had the means and the motive. to commit the brutal assault on his family. They now need to solidify the case.
One of the most common misconceptions about murder investigations, for sure, is the need to arrest the killer right away. That's not the case. It's the exact opposite. You're trained to make sure before you lay a charge, you have a reasonable grounds of convicting the person you're charging. You gotta have that evidence first.
We wanted to make sure there were no loose ends when we made that arrest. We knew that we were only going to have one good shot. For Craig Height to have the opportunity to commit this crime, several pieces need to fall into place. Those included for Philip, Linda, and Carey to be at the same place at the same time with no witnesses around.
They re-interviewed the one person with that knowledge, Carey's wife, Robin.
He hasn't said to me, I did it, or, my God, if he had told me that he had done it, I would have called you. I mean, honestly, I just did not believe that he would do that, or could do that.
I can protect you, you tell me the truth. You bullshit me, I'm not gonna be able to protect you, but I'm gonna tell you something. If he did do this, and he thinks you told us something, do not think for 1 second that he will not walk up in your house and shoot you in the face just like he did them.
If I knew something, I would have told you that day that you first questioned me. I would not lie to you about a murder.
She provides a critical new detail.
Rob and Craig are in communication with each other that night. And Robin says, you know, Carey left me.
His opportunity came to fruition when Carey and Robin had a huge fight that Sunday.
This proves that Craig knew Carey was with his parents that night. While the evidence against him remains circumstantial, the timeline of that final fateful day shows he was the only one capable of committing the brutal attack.
The spark started when Robin and Craig were confronted about the affair. That's when the fuse was lit. He talked to Robin Height, and he learned that night that Carey was staying at the family home.
That's when he decided it's what he needed to do. He needed to go in there and eliminate these problems in his life.
He got his shotgun. He goes over to the home. He uses the key to enter the residence. He goes in and he shoots Carey, point blank, and rushes in to shoot Philip, who's awakened by the sound of the shotgun. Linda, thank God, was not in the bedroom and was in the bathroom. He turns and shoots her as she opens the door. At that time, she's knocked out. He picks up the shotgun shells. He goes out, he gets the gas. He pours gas. As he's going to set the fire, he hears his mother on the phone. At that time, he doesn't know if the local law enforcement will be there in a moment. He doesn't know how long she's been on the phone. He doesn't know if his brother Chris has been called, who is less than a mile away. So he has no other choice but to leave.
Police are now certain of his guilt, but as they prepare to make the arrest, they make a disturbing discovery.
Craig had actually moved into the home of Carey Height and Robin Height. and began to take over a father figure role. Craig was taking over his brother's life. He was raising his kids, driving his truck, sleeping with his wife. It just was appalling. We received the telephone call that at the end of the school year that Craig and Robin were moving to South Carolina.
On May 22, 2009, 9 months after the murders, Craig Height is arrested.
I truly believe that Craig is a sociopath. That's the only way somebody could commit the crimes that he committed.
When she is informed, Robin has a surprising response.
Initially, Robin didn't believe that he was involved.
I'm telling you, he is the one. You've seen the warrants that killed your husband, his father, and shot his mother.
He just kept saying, I did not do this. I swear to you, I did not do this. And I just believed him.
He really had a lot of control over Robin. But after his arrest and he no longer had control, she became more forthright into their relationship and what all had happened.
Robin's mindset started changing about his possible involvement.
As the trial begins, the family remains divided.
There are some members of the family that want to believe that he was not involved.
Chris never could reconcile the fact that his brother committed these horrific crimes. I truly believe Linda knows that he committed these crimes, but you have to remember that, she's still Craig's mother. She lost one son. She was about to lose another one. No mother would ever want to admit that she raised a son that's capable of doing what Craig did.
The jury ultimately found Craig Height guilty of murdering his father and his brother and brutally attacking his mother.
Craig Height is sentenced to 2 life terms, plus an additional 85 years.
He's essentially going to spend the rest of his life in prison.
You work hard, you put all this effort into a case, and you get the verdict that you're seeking. You do feel good because you felt like justice has been served. But on the flip side of that, you still have a broken family and community that was going to take a long time to heal. Your heart goes out to that family.
The amount of stab wounds and the force that was used, it was a very violent attack.
A brutal killing.
She didn't deserve this. She was totally innocent.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
She had come into a lump sum of money not too long before her murder. He seemed to have been communicating with a number of other women.
This guy is a cold-blooded sociopath.
I've never had any suspect be able to give me the chills like he did.
The truth will be revealed.
He said, "No, man, you got it all wrong." And that's when the most bizarre story poured out of him. You could not write this script for a movie.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. "80 miles west of Detroit lies the city of Jackson, Michigan.
It's a blue-collar working town, and it's a very hard-working town.
It's a really safe, nice community. It was routine for neighbors not to lock their doors and for kids to just play in the yard, and everyone felt very safe out there.
I need somebody outside my house right now. My fiancé, I think she's dead.
Nick?
There's blood everywhere.
Do you know where it's coming from?
I don't know.
Okay, can you tell if she's breathing?
She's not. She's cold. She's dead. She's dead. Oh my God.
The victim is identified as 28-year-old Frances Craig.
I was out mowing the lawn, and my wife was in the house, and she came out screaming with the phone in her hand. She couldn't talk. I went into like a shock. Frances was exceptionally good mom. She was independent. She wanted to do everything herself. She was pulling 2 jobs and taking care of her children. She was going to school, and she was about a month away from getting her associate's degree in marketing when this happened.
Frances was going to get married in the fall of 2014. She was living with her fiancé, Eric Wolf, who had a child of his own, soon to be her stepdaughter.
They had just moved into this home, their dream home, the home they wanted to raise their girls in and be a happy family. She was so incredibly loved.
Detectives Andrew Sullivan and Brian Huttenlocker, along with prosecutors Katie Razmirsky and Kelsey McKinney, are assigned to the case.
We want to track all of Frances's movements for the previous 24 hours to see if there was any type of confrontation or any type of disagreement she had to give somebody a reason to murder her.
When I arrived on scene, they pointed me in the direction of Eric Wolf, who was the fiancé of the victim and also the 911 caller. During Mr. Wolf's interview, we asked him basically for a timeline. Mr. Wolf informed us that he worked an overnight shift at a local factory. He said he had been at work that evening from 6 p.m. till 6 in the morning. Stated he had found her not breathing, unresponsive, and indicated to dispatch that she was deceased. When I entered the master bedroom where Frances Craig was located, the first thing that caught my eye was the bed was askew from the wall.
The bed had a large pool of blood on it.
It did appear like there was some type of struggle.
We did observe zip ties on the victim's left wrist. The victim appeared to have been stabbed several times in the neck and chest area. And that's where all the blood was coming from.
The way that she was killed was a brutal, seemingly very angry stabbing.
It was really hard for them to determine which were stab wounds and which were slash wounds. She had so many of them, and they were overlapping all on her neck and into her shoulder area, collarbone area. Over 20 stab and slash wounds.
Also appeared that she had been gagged, and it appeared to be some type of scarf.
She had a robe on, but her robe was pushed up over the lower part of her body. The investigators needed to take all of these things, preserve them for prints and DNA, send them up to the lab.
As the forensic analysis gets underway, police examine the rest of the residence.
There appeared to have been no forced entry. It appears that no one or nothing else in that house was disturbed. So robbery doesn't seem to have been in play here. There seemed to be an emotion that went along with the killing that you typically only associate with a loved one or someone known very well to your victim.
It was something that was up close and personal.
This warrants a more detailed examination of her fiancé's story.
Eric stated that he left work shortly after 6. He stopped at a local fast food restaurant and then continued on home.
Eric saw her lying on the floor.
He thought that maybe she had had too much to drink and thought she had just passed out in that condition. We didn't completely buy that. Even if they thought they were drunk and passed out, they would still try to shake them to make sure they're okay.
But he made a decision to just close the door and walk away from that scene. At some point thereafter, Franny's daughters went to the bedroom. We know, unfortunately, that they saw her in the position that she was ultimately found. The girls then went downstairs and were able to get Eric fully awake and to let him know that something was very, very wrong.
Eric's interview raises a series of troubling questions.
Franny's last text to Eric was at 12:42 a.m. Something about the children and not being in bed.
We did consult with the Michigan State Crime Lab, and they did note that by looking at the blood that Frances had been dead for several hours. So we know it happened sometime after midnight, but before he had said he'd first located her shortly after 6 in the morning.
He then called the police at 10:55 in the morning.
So it had been a period of time as Frances lay dead on her bedroom floor before 911 was called.
Police bring Eric into the station for further questions.
He wasn't super emotional, as in when somebody loses a close one. So we took that as kind of a clue.
A lot of things that Eric said didn't add up to us.
At some point in the interview, he makes a statement asking if she might have committed suicide.
That was the question. That didn't make any sense either. She was a happy, hardworking, on the cusp of great things kind of a gal, about to graduate, about to be married, had 3 young kids.
So he gave lots of contradictory statements.
Eric was suspect number 1.
Confusing statements to police have made Frances Craig's fiancé, Eric Wolf, the first suspect in her murder.
He adamantly denied he had anything to do with it, and so the investigators were still trying to find anything to really link him to the crime.
Detectives examine the couple's relationship.
It appeared that both Frances and Eric had a lot of stress going on at this time. Eric was working 12-hour shifts, and Franny was taking care of the children and also working 2 jobs. We did learn of a couple incidents where other people had heard Frances and Eric arguing. Family members had seen them get in a pretty heated argument about how to discipline or raise one of the children.
Eric, he always knew the answer. You didn't know anything. You know, and it didn't seem like you respected women.
They might have just been at wit's end with each other and very stressed out about the upcoming wedding. One of them could have been having second thoughts.
They look to their digital lives for more clues.
Technology and internet open up a whole new chapter in how investigators investigate crimes. In this case, we got into Eric's iCloud account, we got into Franny's account, we pulled their IP addresses for their home internet to see what searches were done in their home from any devices that were connected to that IP address.
We were able to determine from cell phone records and cell phone devices, Mr. Wolf actually had been communicating with some other females outside of the relationship.
Eric's phone records reveal he spoke with one of the women at 9:08 p.m.
Definitely appeared that he was coming across as single, not someone that was engaged to be married. We also learned that on one of the sites, he was actually using an alias, not using his real name, but exchanging pictures of himself.
There was some level of unhappiness or maybe lack of commitment on Eric's part in this relationship. It put him more firmly in the hot seat as a suspect. The detectives made contact with as many of those women as they could to determine their whereabouts in the hours leading up to this homicide, to determine what the level of their connection with Eric had been.
We were able to determine that they had no knowledge of the homicide or no involvement. In fact, we're shocked to even learn that Mr. Wolf is engaged. We were able to rule them out as having any involvement.
They need to take a detailed look at his alibi.
Eric worked the midnight shift. But it's one thing to say I worked that shift. It's another thing to sort of determine, were you in fact at that establishment that entire period of time?
So I do go to his work, did speak with management. They do have cameras on their time clocks, so I did ask if they could pull the cameras. I did view that he did in fact come in just before 6 p.m. and that he left shortly after 6 a.m.
This means Eric could not have been responsible for his fiancé's murder.
So Eric, while had put himself on the top of our list, we had nothing to really tie him to the homicide.
They looked for other clues within Frances's personal life.
It was clear they had just bought this home. The detectives were interested in how did that come about, who paid for it, where did the money come from. They did find that Franny had come into a lump sum of money not too long before her murder.
Investigators dig into the source of her newfound wealth.
As they peeled back the layers of that information, what they found was that Franny had actually been assaulted in the somewhat recent past at a clothing store that she worked at.
We spoke with family and friends to see what they knew of it.
The kids were in there trying to steal stuff. And my daughter kicked them out. And then the mother of the kids started beating on my daughter and another employee that was there. They were just hitting her, knocking her down and hitting her. And, I mean, she had a hard time. She couldn't even go back to that store again. She had post-traumatic shock from it.
They were criminally charged in the matter. And she ended up suing and received the large sum of money from this family.
Francis's courtroom victory only led to more bad blood.
And there were some threats made by one of the suspects. So that certainly perked my interest. They were obviously very angry with her and could have reason to want to harm or kill Francis.
There are thousands of threats that occur every day. Do we take them all seriously? It's one thing to say, I'm going to kill you. Does the victim actually believe you and feel threatened? Then it becomes a death threat and a criminal offense.
She was terrified. I mean, she didn't know what they were going to do. They just went crazy.
I went up to Lansing, met up with the detective, and she and I went over to the residence. They definitely had some disagreements with Francis. Shortly into the interview, I did reveal that Francis had been murdered. They appeared to be very surprised.
Investigators must determine if they were in the Jackson County area during the time Francis was killed.
They were able to give me a pretty detailed timeline. I did check with some cameras at the locations they said they were. Also checked with their alibi witnesses. And I was able to, through all that, verify that they were, in fact, where they said they were.
Hoping to uncover clues about Francis's attacker, investigators begin speaking with other people who she interacted with during her final day.
We know that in the early part of the day, she spent time with friends and family.
I did speak with one of her friends she had been with. She remembers looking at the clock just before Francis left. The friend specifically noted she left at 8:09 p.m. Then she went and picked up her kids.
Francis and the children, along with a family babysitter, go to the Jackson County Fair. We were able to pull some pictures off social media that she had posted from the fair and also coordinate the cell phone, GPS, that she was in fact at the fair at the exact timestamp that the photo was uploaded.
We determined that she was at the fair until about closing time, which would be just around 10 o'clock. Figured she got home close to 11 o'clock in the evening.
Through the analysis of her movements by cell phone, they uncover a new lead.
We were able to determine that she communicated with a number that appeared to be for somewhat of a lengthy period of time.
The individual was Alex, who is her ex and the father of her two children.
We always look into the ex-husband, boyfriend of the victim, specifically when they have children involved.
He definitely fell right into the timeline of the homicide, as the communication between them was the day before.
Makes one wonder, was there contention between the two of them?
Investigators were able to speak with Franny's parents in regards to Alex. It appeared that the relationship might not have been the best.
I didn't think they got along at all, like two normal people would, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend. She tried to make it work, but he didn't want anything to do with it, so she said the heck with it and broke off.
When you're dealing with an ex, that ex has to come up with some very powerful alibi information. Otherwise, you are looking definitely at someone who could be a suspect.
The discovery of a rocky past between Frances Craig and her former partner has made him the latest suspect in her murder.
With him having a relationship with Franny previously and also still being involved in her life, being the father of her two children, it was somebody that we had to investigate further and either rule him out as a suspect or continue investigating.
There is a responsibility of any investigator to follow every lead, especially where there's a suspicion the suspect lies within the family circle. Most murder victims know their killers.
For Alex, the truth lies in his timeline.
He had his cell phone with him that particular day, leading up to the homicide and during the hours of the homicide. A cell phone can tell us not just who we're communicating with at any given time. Most all of them these days place us in time and space. They ping off of different towers, and they help us know where a cell phone is location-wise. Based on that information, investigators were able to determine that Alex was nowhere in the area at the time this homicide occurred.
We were comfortable enough ruling him out as having involvement in the homicide.
So far, the most viable candidate is still her fiancé, Eric Wolf.
We had the money motive, we had the love motive, we had the outside relationship motive. So we had all these definitely fitting motives. But again, we had no hard evidence to prove those motives.
It was wildly frustrating.
As investigators, obviously our motive is justice in the end, but we also want to get closure for the family and her friends.
It was very difficult for us to go through that. Frances was a good person. She didn't deserve this. Our relationship was great with the detectives. They told us as much as they could. And I think what made us the maddest is when people would say, well, why aren't you not trying hard enough?
The investigators in this case were tireless, literally tireless. There is not a stone that they left unturned.
Detectives get word the forensic analysis has finally been completed.
I received information from the Michigan State Police Crime Lab that they were able to get a DNA hit on the zip ties that were located on Franny's left wrist. The information I received was that it was a CODIS hit, which means that it was a known offender, and it came back to a Cortez Butler.
We all just looked at each other around the table and went, who? Have you heard of this guy? Do you know this guy? Is he connected to Jackson? Is he connected to Franny? Is he connected to Eric? Does anybody know anything about Cortez Butler? And the short answer was no.
We were advised that Cortez Butler is a hitman. He'll murder anybody for the right price. And that he has murdered people throughout the country. So at that point, we want to try to link Eric to Cortez. Our thought is possibly Eric may have hired him to kill Francis.
Detectives believe they've found the hitman who murdered Francis Craig, Cortez Butler. Now they have to determine what caused her to be his target.
We didn't want to tip our hand at anything, so we kind of had to hold it close to the chest and figure out what we needed to do with this lead and how it needed to be followed up on. We wanted to make sure that when we found them that we had all of our ducks in a row, because we knew we'd probably only get one shot to see what his involvement was in our homicide.
They contacted his parole agent to find out what they could find out about him, and immediately kicked out a search warrant for information, phone records, anything they could get.
Once we got Cortez's phone records, we were able to see that he had traveled from Detroit to Jackson within that timeline of 24 hours before the homicide. We were able to watch it kind of drive down I-94 and hit off of towers as it came. But then he turned his phone off. And he turned his phone off right at the time of the murder. We were able to then pick it back up, going back down I-94. About 2:11 is when he turned his phone back on.
At that point, we now know that Cortez Butler is on Francis Craig's timeline.
So we have him in Jackson, but we still don't know what his relationship with either Eric or Franny actually is.
To find that out, they must speak to him directly.
In the middle of the night, we get a call from a captain of Detroit PD.
Detroit police have tracked down Cortez Butler.
At that point, Detective Sullivan and I jumped in our car and we drove to Detroit.
We sat down with Mr. Butler, introduced ourselves, explained where we are from to see if that would maybe get a reaction from him, knowing that we were from Jackson. Asked him about any connections he'd ever had to Jackson, if he knows anyone in Jackson, if he would have any reason to travel to Jackson. He said no to all those. I slid the lab report over towards him and showing that his DNA was on the zip ties involved in our homicide. We did ask him whether he was hired by Mr. Wolf or whether he knew Mr. Wolf. Mr. Butler just kind of had a blank stare, and again, he repeated that he'd never been to Jackson. Mr. Butler was a cold individual. He showed no emotion, no reaction, and requested to return to his cell at that point.
With Butler refusing to cooperate, they must find another way of uncovering who hired him.
At Cortez's residence, among other things, several phones were located and confiscated, and ultimately they were examined.
we learn that he is having contact with one other person, and he's had contact with that person more than 200 times in a pretty short amount of time.
A search warrant is issued for that cell phone number. What comes back is that that phone is registered to an individual named, of all names in the world, Dorito Johnson.
We were pretty sure Dorito Johnson was not a real name and that someone had used a street name or a fake name for that phone. We asked our local kind of undercover drug investigators to look into this name, and they said, yes, Dorito Johnson is Clifford McKee. So Clifford was someone we then were very interested in because Clifford was also our first connection back to Jackson.
Clifford had ties to both Jackson and Detroit. And we were able to determine that there was a relationship between Clifford McKee and Cortez Butler. They had served prison time together.
If you've got an extensive criminal background and you've served time in a federal penitentiary where other people around you are in there for violent crimes, it's easier than you might think to find somebody who's willing to kill somebody else for $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000. The problem is that a person who is willing to kill somebody for money isn't necessarily a trustworthy person. You better hope that no trail ever leads back to that hitman, because once that happens, you as the person who hired him are done.
Armed with Clifford's name, investigators returned to Cortez Butler.
At this point in the investigation, we were not able to connect Mr. Butler or Clifford McKee to Eric Wolf.
That's what they needed to do. They said to him, we know you had something to do with it. There's no way around that. Your DNA is on the zip tie. You can't get past that. We think you're the guy who carried it out, but we don't think you're the guy who wanted it carried out because you don't have any connection to this. And so they said, we need your help. We have a little kid who's in danger of going back to a guy we think hired you to kill Franny. And he said, no, man, you got it all wrong. And that's when the most unexpected, unanticipated, bizarre story poured out of him that you could ever possibly imagine. You could not write this script for a movie.
Detectives have hitman Cortez Butler cornered, but they have yet to confirm who ordered the hit.
Butler started to fill us in on the whole sequence of events and who the players were in this homicide. Mr. Butler told us that he was contacted by Clifford McKee, that he knew from prison, stating that his nephew Rodney was in trouble in Jackson and was facing a very serious charge based on the arson that he committed. He basically needed a witness to go away.
Ryan Marshall was the eyewitness to Rodney McKee's arson case. Ryan Marshall was the key to Rodney McKee going to prison.
Clifford McKee and Cortez Butler settled on a price of $10,000. $5,000 would be paid up front to kill Ryan Marshall.
As the investigators got this story from Cortez, this confession firsthand, Detective Sullivan was almost bouncing out of his chair.
Ryan Marshall and Eric Wolf were longtime friends. They were childhood friends. And at the point when Ryan's house is burnt down, he has no place to stay. Rather than putting him up in a shelter, Eric and Francis allowed him to stay with them. And then when they had bought the house, at that point, they kind of told him that we were helping you out while your house burnt down, but we're starting a family and we just can't stay here any longer. So Ryan leaves. Unfortunately, that information didn't get passed on to Cortez Butler.
Butler lays out in gruesome detail the events that transpired in the hours before Francis Craig was murdered, and how a perfect day came to a brutal end.
The 24 hours leading up to Francis's murder seemed as normal and idyllic as they could possibly have been. She spent this nice long time with friends and then was at the fair until it shut down that night.
Cortez comes over from Detroit to Jackson. His phones are hitting off of all the towers down I-94. He walks through backyards, goes through the side door of the garage.
Cortez Butler talks about looking at the time on the microwave in the kitchen at 1:42 a.m. Cortez described going all through the house looking for Ryan and not finding him. But finding Franny in her bed. He describes gagging her and binding her wrists with the zip ties and asking her about Ryan, but she kept trying to look at him. And so, in his words, he had to take her out.
Stabs her repeatedly, kills her, drags her off the bed.
And then Cortez, just as quietly as he came in, quietly leaves.
He described it so factually and so unemotionally that it appeared to not affect him at all. It was actually chilling, the calm manner in which he described it and his attitude towards it. It was surreal. I've never had any suspect be able to kind of give me the chills like he did.
He verifies that Eric Wolf had no take in it. He didn't know Eric Wolf, didn't know anything about Eric Wolf.
One of the most heartbreaking things for me about this case will always be that those little girls had to see their mother the way that they did. It's a tragedy. Sorry. Franny gets me, man.
We see a lot of really heinous crimes in our world as prosecutors. But very rarely do you have a victim who was engaged in zero risky behavior. I mean, Franny was doing nothing wrong, but at home in her bed, taking care of those 3 little girls. And that because of 3 evil, heinous men, she had to lose her life. She's the definition of collateral damage.
On October 7th, 2015, Cortez Butler is charged with first-degree murder. Clifford McKee and Rodney McKee are also charged with soliciting murder and first-degree murder.
When we went to court, we didn't miss a minute of it. This involves my daughter. She would do it for me. It was a harder process, but at the end, the jury got it right.
They all received life sentences without the chance of parole.
Their convictions are currently under appeal.
Cortez Butler, he's got a special place in hell when he finally does die. I guarantee you that. This guy is a cold-blooded sociopath. He's just a good kid. I mean, couldn't ask for better. The detectives did a fantastic job. And all my thanks would go to them for at least giving us that peace of mind that these guys are behind bars the rest of their life.